Self-storage development step 5, doors.
So after the buildings had been erected, the next big step was to get all of the doors installed on each unit. And we had 170 cold storage drive-up units here, so we needed 170 doors. And the door manufacturer that we decided to get our doors from was TracRite, and we got their Model 944 door. And these doors were all delivered on a big semi-truck, and they got there and unloaded the pallets and just set them right there on the ground. And then we had a local subcontractor come and install these doors for us, and it took them several days to get it done. The first step was basically just to unwrap these doors and put them in each individual unit, and then they had to go one by one through each unit and mount all of the hardware that holds the doors in place. And then they had to come back again and actually hang all the doors one by one. And it honestly looked like a pretty tedious job, just having to do the same thing 170 times. And the way these doors work is they have springs that are going to always pull the doors open once they're unlatched. The doors themselves are actually pretty heavy things if those springs weren't there, trying to lift that thing by yourself. But with that spring in place, it'll just pull it up and make it really easy to open the thing. And I've heard of older storage facilities that have a lot of these doors where the springs break over time, which can be super annoying because then your tenant has to deal with a door that won't open, and then you have to get in there and replace the spring time and time and time again. Apparently the way they manufacture these now is they put a Teflon-like material over these springs, so the metal springs are completely covered. So it just protects the metal. And when I talked with TracRite, they told me that the springs are expected to last about 10 years. They come with a 10-year warranty, and they estimate it at 15,000 full opens and closes. So Lord willing, these things will last a good long time. And we had two different sizes of doors because we have a number of 5x10 units. So those doors are 5 feet wide, and we have a lot more 10-foot wide doors. Another thing about the door is deciding on the color. So the color scheme that I decided on here was to have ash gray buildings, and then I think the color for the doors was called evergreen. And this actually is significant if you ever build more units in the future, because the colors from the buildings to the doors, or from one door company to another door company, don't always match up exactly. So if we ever build more of these units and we want to have the same color door, we basically have to order the exact same door from the exact same company with the exact same color, or there's going to be a slight difference. And the color of the door is almost like part of the branding. I've seen some facilities that will get different colors for doors based on the sizes of the units, which is kind of a creative way just to identify which units are which sizes. But we just got the same color for every single door, and that color green is the same green we have built into our logo and our website. So it's kind of chosen intentionally to work with the brand of the storage facility. And we actually had a little bit of an issue with the doors on these properties, not with all of them, but we probably saw this with about 15 of the 170 doors, where there were some issues with where the latch was lining up with the hole in the side rail. So in order to understand the anatomy of these things, there's basically these two brackets above the door that hold the rolling door in place. And then when you pull that door down, the door is guided by these side rails on both sides. Without those side rails, the door will just be flopping all over the place in the wind. So those side rails are really important to make sure it's actually closed tightly. And then once you get it closed, there's a latch in the door that is supposed to slide over into a hole that's built into the side rail. And I never thought this would be that difficult of a thing, but apparently it was, because a lot of these latches were not lining up directly with the hole in the side rail. It might be like an inch off or a centimeter off, to the point that in order to close these things and actually latch them, I basically had to stand on them in order to get the thing closed tight enough to the point that I could slide the latch into the hole. And if you're not able to slide that latch in and close it that way, then these things are going to open right back up because of the tension on the springs that's constantly pulling that door upward if that latch is not in place. So it's very important that that latch lines up with the hole, or you don't have a good functioning door. And I kept thinking about this, like, what if there is a 90-year-old lady here who is trying to close this door and she can't push this thing tight enough to latch it? I mean, I'm sitting here basically standing on some of these things and I still can't get it closed. So if I can't do it, are tenants going to be able to do this? Is this going to be a problem for them? And I was talking with my contractor about this, and one thing he pointed out is that the seal on this type of door, which is like the rubber strip at the bottom to keep out the rain and the snow and the elements, that's supposed to be in full contact with the ground. And when it's really cold outside, like it was when I was first testing these out in the middle of February and Michigan, and when the doors are brand new and the seals haven't really been broken in yet, that rubber seal at the bottom is a lot harder to push down at first, and it just takes some time. And then once it warms up a little bit, it becomes softer. And I actually found that I had gone through one of our buildings and tested every single door in February when it was freezing cold outside, and I made notes on like a bunch of doors, like probably half of them on one of our buildings that I couldn't get closed or I found really difficult to get closed. But then interestingly, when I came back a couple months later and tried it out in April, I was able to close almost all of them with relative ease. So that colder weather absolutely does have an impact on the doors, especially when the doors are brand new. So if anybody else out there is ever dealing with this issue, make sure it's warm outside, and you might have to push it down pretty hard at first, but it shouldn't stay that way forever once those seals get flattened a little bit and broken in. There were definitely still, like I said, about 15 doors that still had this problem even after the weather had warmed up and we had tried flattening them out for a while. It was still very difficult to close these things. So the changing weather did help a little bit, but it didn't fix the problem on every door. And in talking with TracRite, it sounds like this is a fairly abnormal thing to have this issue when you're installing new doors, because it's all factory cut and it's supposed to be exact. But the issue we had was apparently the first time all these doors were ordered, they ordered the wrong size side rail guides. They go on the sides to guide the door down. It was like a foot off because I guess they didn't have the correct height of our building. So then we had to reorder the correct size side rails. And I think that's where and why this problem came into existence, because the side rails we ended up installing were not the original ones that were shipped with the doors themselves. But once you have this issue, there is a right and a wrong way to correct this. The wrong way to do it is to try to take a Sawzall and just cut the hole bigger. And this can definitely fix the problem of just making the hole the correct size so that it's easier to close, but it ends up looking like a hack job. It leaves behind some very sharp metal. I almost felt like I was getting cut just looking at it. So that, in my opinion, is not an acceptable solution. But there's this tool called a die grinder, and it's not particularly cheap if you just have one door to fix, but you can just get a die that you put on here, and then you can just use this tool to slowly guide that thing up while it's spinning, and it will give you a rounded cut, but it will at least be a finished looking cut that doesn't look so sharp. I never actually saw what my contractor did, but apparently they have some kind of a hole punch tool that can do this as well. And I think it might be a little bit less precise, but it can still give you a similar end product where it just looks a little bit more finished and not so sharp and jagged like it would with a Sawzall. But I also then noticed that they actually overcorrected some of these things so that there was like a gap between where the seal was supposed to meet the ground. It's like, well, I guess that's great that we can close it now, but I don't want this thing overcorrected, because remember, the way these doors work is that once that latch is undone, the spring is going to pull the door up. So they're basically always designed to have that tension where it's constantly pulling up, and once it's unlatched, it'll just fly right up like that. So when you see this kind of gap like that, that's not ideal either. And luckily, the gap was not so big that it was letting a bunch of water or rain in, because once you open these doors, there's also this little lip on the inside. So even if a little bit of water did get in there, it wouldn't actually get up into the unit and get everything wet. And for those who do have a situation like we suddenly did, where the slot was now higher than it was supposed to be, TracRite does sell this lock hole adjustment angle. You could buy this and then bring that level down to bring it down to where it's supposed to be. So that was just a problem that I never thought we'd have to deal with. And when you think about a door in a storage unit, this is actually like one of the most important things about the storage unit. I mean, this kind of defines a big part of the experience that a tenant is going to have with that unit. I mean, if they go up to the door and they can't open it, or they can't close it, or if it's too heavy to open, or if it's all banged up, or it just looks bad, or if anything about the appearance or the operation of that door looks or just feels insecure in some way, it's going to say a lot about the overall perception of that storage facility. It's one of the few moving parts that tenants are going to constantly encounter and have to work with. We had to go through a lot of gyrations to get these things resolved, but we finally got there, and the doors are all closable and they're sealing right. It just took a lot more work to get there than I thought it would. And just to be clear, the issues I had in this experience were really no fault of TracRite's. I think TracRite doors are a great product. It's a beautiful door. I would totally buy from them again. I think the issue came down more to the installation of it and maybe even the ordering of it. I'm not even sure who ordered versus installed it and how that all came together, but if I were to do this over again, I would probably just get a different company to install these things for me. But yeah, that was our experience. And in the next video, I'm going to talk about a lot of the finishing touches that went into completing this facility. And there were actually a lot of finishing touches after the doors were done. Everything from the parking lot to moving power poles to installing the fence and the gate and the security cameras. So there's a lot to cover in the finishing touches piece of this. And that's what we'll get to in the next video. I'll see you there.